This summer, we embarked on a 3-week trip to the Southeast Asian country of Myanmar. While preparing for this trip last winter, we learned a lot about the country and its people, but what was not highlighted was the immense diversity we would find. Diversity was everywhere we looked, from the people to the food, both of which take their roots from the country's variegated past.
The history of Myanmar extends back farther than most people believe. Major characters and dynasties started to arise around 1000 CE. The first was the Bagan dynasty, located in central Myanmar. The king who managed to unify the surrounding areas was a man by the name of Anaranta. He put in place many reforms that shaped Myanmar into the country that it is today. In fact, many of these reforms are still present today. Under these reforms, Myanmar became a wealthy and prosperous country. Its language, while previously alien and unknown, became the standard in the area, becoming as common as English today. However, this golden age would not last long. About 200 years later, the kingdom started to collapse, and by about 13,000 CE, the kingdom had broken apart into many smaller regions. Myanmar experienced little after the fall of the Bagan Empire, but in the late 1800s, the British invaded and conquered Myanmar. The people of Myanmar experienced many hardships, as many of the high-ranking officers and workers were actually Indians the British had brought over. Eventually, in 1920, the youth struck out in a series of strikes against the government. These were the first ever university student strikes in history, and were targeted at the unfairness that the Myanmar people experienced in their day-to-day lives. In World War II, Myanmar experienced another takeover, this time by the Japanese. This was, however, a very short takeover, and a few events of importance happened throughout this time. One of the big promises that Japan had made, but had never fulfilled, was freedom. The native people of Myanmar would be allowed more freedom, yet it never ended up happening. What did happen was the preservation of Buddhism throughout all of the turmoil. Not only did it stay prevalent, but also true to its ideals and teachings. After World War II, Myanmar became a country almost at war with itself. This was where General Aung San stepped in. He helped negotiate the treaty that made Myanmar an independent country, and also helped to quell the civil unrest. However, this peace would be short-lived, as less than a year into their freedom, Aung San was assassinated, and the country was plunged into darkness and chaos. A military coup took over, and has ruled the country with an iron fist until very recently. Under the rule of the military, Myanmar became one of the poorest countries in the world. Many attempts to freedom and their own rights were squashed before they could gain much ground. However, there appeared a small sliver of hope for the people of Myanmar. Nobel Peace Prize recipient Aung San Suu Kyi, the daughter of General Aung San, attempted to lead her party to victory in an election held in 1990. They won on a landslide victory. However, the government refused to acknowledge this victory, and instead put Aung San Suu Kyi on house arrest. The result of this has convinced much of the public to give up on trying voting for their freedom, because it didn't work back then, and won't work now. However, hope is still there for Myanmar. The government has become less strict and more open to opportunities for the youth. This is the generation that is on the tipping point for Myanmar, and will help decide much of its future.
The people of this country are the most apparent example of its extreme diversity. Over time, many different cultures have come to reside in Myanmar, resulting in an incredibly diverse ethnic gene pool. Every skin tone imaginable can be found by a quick glance into any large street. The Myanmar government recognizes 135 different ethnic groups that are categorized into 8 major ethnic groups: the Bama, Shan, Kayin, Rakhine, Chinese, Mon, Kachin, and Kayat. The largest group, by far, is the Bama people, who were initially native to the central and southwestern parts of Myanmar. Their ancestors originally immigrated from Tibet and the surrounding region, bringing with them that area's form of Buddhism. However, outside of the ones that are acknowledged, there exist other ethnic groups that remain unrecognized by the government, even though they make up a significant portion of the society. Indians make up a larger percentage of the country's population than the Kaya, a federally recognized ethnic group. Indian workers were brought over by the hundreds by the British to work in Myanmar. The Indian population in Myanmar has grown exponentially since then, so much so that the capital of Mon State, called Momine, appeared to have a higher population of Indians than any other ethnic group while we were visiting there. Be that as it may, it is hard to find a concentration of ethnic variation outside of the country's big cities like Yangon and Mandalay. What is very interesting about Myanmar is that it is divided into large states, based almost entirely on ethnicity. There's Shan State, whose inhabitants are mostly Shan, Kachin State, whose inhabitants are mostly Kachin, and so on. Each of Burma's large states is almost exclusively one ethnicity due to historical immigration patterns. Each of the states have their own chief exports, cultures, and landscapes that have shaped the people and their livelihoods. An interesting example is the Kachin people. They claim that they are an autonomous state under their own leadership and are currently engaging in a small civil war against the government of Myanmar. Additionally, almost the entire economy of this state is based on their international sale of opium and guns. However, other states in the region have their own economies that are completely dissimilar and just as unique, whether they are based on fishing, farming, or textiles. The lives and experience of the people are affected by their economies and their surroundings every day.
June 15th, 2014. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the bustle of the city streets outside of our hotel. We excitedly got ready, putting our clothes on at lightning speed. Grabbing our day packs, we rushed down the creaky stairs and made our way to the front desk. 18 of us, our eyes darting around the lobby with excitement. Our instructors inform us that we are going to a tea house for our first Myanmar breakfast. This was our first morning. Myanmar's history, which has shaped its people and its architecture. But another facet of this culture that has been touched by its past is its overwhelming variety of food. Chinese, Thai, and Indian cuisine has affected Myanmar's food the most. In the mountains, farmers farm mainly rice. During our homestays in the mountains, rice was served with every meal, usually accompanied with different types of meat. And throughout our journey, rice was a main staple in each of our meals. Vegetables can also be found in almost every meal, so to maintain a stable diet. During my homestay, there were green peppers that I would always see my homestay brother and father snack on throughout the day. During breakfast, they were laid out in a bowl on the table. We started eating and everything was going great until I got curious. I reached for one of the green peppers and before my homestay dad could yell out, I took a huge bite out of the pepper. My homestay family freaked out. They started bringing me water and tissue. They didn't understand what they were doing until it hit me. The pepper that I had bit out of was one of the hottest in Myanmar. At least that's how I felt. My mouth was on fire and my nose was running. I thought I was going to die. Water, of course, made it worse, spreading the oils around in my mouth. I sat at the table, a wreck, and I gained a special type of respect for my homestay father and brother that day. In Myanmar, you can maintain a healthy, balanced diet, but the question is what to eat. Myanmar people are very small individuals, and it is believed that their nutrition is to blame. Fresh fruits and vegetables are not readily available to eat by everyone. Many are impoverished and cannot afford all that is necessary for a balanced diet. In the United States, we have programs such as food stamps that act as a safety net in case someone cannot pay for the food they need. In Myanmar, there are no such safety nets. If you don't have a job, you don't get unemployment. Lots of individuals are left with nothing to call their own. And when you're worried about the next place you are going to sleep, you are not worried about how balanced your diet is. A lot of young children work at the tea shops in Myanmar. Some kids work at tea shops, and when they close down for the night, they sleep there as well. These kids are also taken out of school so that they can support and work for their families. But then they do not learn about nutrition and how or what they eat can affect their body. This starts to become a perpetual loop in which families go for generations below the poverty line because of a lack of education. This all stems from economic problems in Myanmar, forcing families to try to support themselves without any help. Myanmar's economic situation allows us to take a step back and realize how lucky we are to have safety nets such as food stamps, Because when it comes to the end of the day, these programs can mean the life or death of men, women, and children. With Myanmar's democracy being newly created, it is definitely starting off rocky, but when their education system improves, it will allow for families to transcend this poverty line and later on build a stronger economy.
After spending some time in the country, it was clear to us what made Myanmar so special was that all of it was so different. The people, the food, and the economy, all products of Myanmar's variegated past, one that is filled with hardship, strife, and fulfillment.